Chapter 62. I saw Keith today. And strangely enough, I didn't even recognize him right away. I'd been wandering the second-floor menswear department of Neiman Marcus, just with a handkerchief, and taking a perverse sort of pleasure in picking up pure silk-pleated front shirts and Italian-made peg trousers that cost more than my rent, and then turning up my nose and tossing the merchandise aside as if it just wasn't my cup of tea. As I shopped, I noticed the big, dark blonde man pursuing ties a few yards away, and the thought skipped across my mind, like a small flat stone across a stream, that there was something about the guy that reminded me of Keith. But after all, the woods are crawling with big, dark blonde men who look vaguely like Keith. Besides, I hadn't seen Keith every once in all the time since we'd parted company, and the time had long since passed when my heart leapt up into the roof of my mouth at the sight of any and every large, big-armed white guy. So when the guy suddenly turned, as if feeling my eyes on him, and I recognized Keith, and he me, and he smiled right at me as if he meant it, my heart leapt up into the roof of my mouth and stuck there like a mouthful of dry peanut butter sandwich. "Long time no see," he said, walked towards me, right hand extended. I took his soft, cool hand in mine and managed. "How are you?" He had hardly changed at all. His hair was just a bit thinner than when I'd last seen him, his waistline just a bit thicker, and he had grown a beard, neatly cropped close to his jawline and a good deal redder than the hair any place else on his body. It made him look like a Viking, or Nordic Jesus. Otherwise, Keith seemed to be much as I'd left him, his hazel eyes just as clear, his physique, an alligator shirt and Calvin Klein's, just as imposing. "I'm just fine," he said. "And yourself?" "Good," I rasped. "I'm just good." "You're looking very healthy." "Healthy?" I thought. "Healthy? Why, you awful son of a bitch, I look terrific." I didn't say anything. God, KT, how long has it been? Hearing him call me by his pet name for me was like an arrow through me. "Almost 4 years," I said. "Seems like a mighty long time. Shabop, my baby." "You look good." He seemed to be repeating himself somewhat. "Still working out." "Uh-huh. Me too." No jive, I thought, fiercely fighting the urge to lick his Adam's apple. "Only once or twice a week these days," Keith continued, "but I'm still at it." Well, there you are. A woman appeared from out of nowhere, as if one of the Armani leather jackets had suddenly given birth. A big-boned Nordic type of the general Liv Ullmann ilk. When she attached herself to Keith's arm like a mosquito to your Uncle Elmo's bald spot, it occurred to me that the lady looked enough like Betsy to be her sister. I suddenly needed a dye gel. The woman smiled in my general direction, one of those wide-open, all-encompassing smiles worn by the kind of woman who smiles at fire hydrants. Keith introduced us. Her name was Debbie. What was it, I wonder, with Keith and these big blonde chicks with the baby doll names? Betsy, Debbie, sheesh. Debbie offered her hand, and I accepted with some reluctance. Her grip was surprisingly delicate for her size. "So, where do you and Keith know each other from?" she asked. "I used to fuck the living daylights out of him," I thought. "College," I said. "Oh, she bought it." She was not unattractive. She looked healthy and strong, good breeding stock, nicely dressed, nicely groomed. I hated her guts. I wanted her stripped naked, covered with K-Rose syrup, and tied securely over an anthill. I smiled at her in what I hoped would pass as the good-natured manner of an old college chum rather than a lonely homosexual musician who wanted nothing more than to shove her into oncoming traffic and sodomize her boyfriend on the floor of the men's department at Neiman's. As we made the most mundane of small talk, "How about the prices on these lamb suede walking shorts?" I took the liberty of undressing Keith with my mind. Remembering the size of him, the arms and chest and bodybuilding hardness of him, the warm weight of him, I found myself absently tying the sleeve of a $200 French-made shirt into a double half hitch. And I found myself wondering, was she good in bed? Was he the same sort of gonzo abandoned sex animal with her that he was with me? And did he ever absently grope between her big soft thighs looking for something that just wasn't there? Looking for me, maybe? Tacky, I thought, mentally rapping myself upon the knuckles. For some reason, Keith asked me to have lunch at the club room with him and Debbie. Like a fool, I said yes. We made more small talk over drinks. "So what have you been doing with yourself?" I asked Keith. "I just moved back from the city." "The city?" San Francisco. The bank moved me up there just after I saw you last. I love the city, but it's good to be back in old La La. How about you? Did the album do well? You know about the album? I happen to own a copy, he said. You're kidding. Pleased me more than I hoped I was letting on. You may own the only copy. Hang on to it. Someday it'll be quite worthless. It's very good, you know. Yes, it is, Debbie chimed in. I've heard it. I didn't recognize you from the cover. Shut up, bitch, I thought. Thank you very much, I said. I liked it too. But the record company didn't push it, hardly distributed it, really. And it died 1,000 deaths. Didn't so much as brush the charts, and has taken up permanent residence in bargain bins across the country. When do you do the next one? Keith asked. What next one? It was just a one-album deal. It was a bad deal from the word go. I should have known better. So what are you doing now? Clubs, still. I even do Sawyer's now and again. It's more or less a name club now. A lot of the new wave kids go there. I do a small tour now and then. Opened for Joan Rivers in Atlantic City for 3 weeks last year. The apex of my career thus far. I keep at it. I stopped absently at a salad niçoise. I picked up the scent of Keith's hair from across the table. I remembered, as I usually only remember when I'm alone at night, the feeling of Keith's hands on my skin, the taste of his cool, wet kiss on my tongue. And I got hard. I was glad we were sitting down. After a while, Debbie excused herself to the ladies' room. I imagined we were boring the poor little girl to tears. I didn't much give a fuck. Keith and I shared a few moments of gawky silence while a pretty blonde busboy cleared the dishes and poured coffee. You know you're in a class joint in L.A. when the busboys are Caucasian. She's nice, I said finally. She's very good for me. Good for you? I said, trying to sound at least semi-sincere, knowing I was failing. She stays home, he said. Touché. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean that like it sounded, he said, staring down into his coffee cup. Keith started to say something, then stopped short. Then, leaning forward, he whispered, You're still so beautiful, Katie. I hoped when I saw you again, I wouldn't think so anymore. So are you, I said, you son of a bitch. We just sat and stared into each other's eyes for a minute or two, grinning foolishly, the way young lovers do, before Keith said, Are you seeing any... No, not for a while now. Do you think... Yes, anything, ask. What? What were you saying? Nothing, I said. What were you saying? I'd like to see you again. I'd like that too. So much for trying not to appear eager. Well, here, Keith pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card, handed it to me. Give me a call. We could have a drink together or something. That's right. You don't drink much. Dinner maybe or something. I didn't say anything. I just took the card. Could I have your number? He asked. I've just recently moved. I don't have a phone yet. That was what Clara would call a bald-faced lie. And frankly, I'm not exactly sure why I lied. Maybe I just wanted to maintain some control over a situation which, for me, was rapidly flying out of control. If I called Keith, there was some small chance of maintaining some semblance of cool. If Keith called me, I knew good and well if he asked me to meet him at the ends of the earth for cocktails, I'd be there with my good shoes on. When Debbie returned from the ladies, we all took it as a signal to adjourn. Keith insisted upon paying for lunch, and I let him. He was, after all, a successful young banker, and I a poor, struggling nightclub performer with a part-time day gig and an album that stiffed. I walked with a happy couple to the sidewalk in front of the store. As we shook hands, Keith held my hand just a little longer than was truly necessary, looked into my eyes, and smiled a smile I hadn't seen in way too many years. If Debbie noticed anything, she didn't let on. As they walked away down Santa Monica Boulevard, and as I watched their backs grow even smaller and merge with those of other shoppers and passers-by, I realized that in my left hand I still held Keith's card. I started to tuck it into my pocket, but stopped short. Who was I trying to kid, I thought. So I call Keith up and we go out for drinks or dinner or something. There was still this woman, this Betsy too, probably the latest in a veritable parade of Betsy's. Besides, it hadn't worked between Keith and me before. What said it was going to work now? I held Keith's card in the palm of my hand for a moment, then crushed the stiff little paper, slowly and deliberately into a little crinkled ball, and dropped it, with a little flip of my wrist, into a convenient trash basket, and walked away.